We are recording with Mr. Troy Anderson on Wednesday, October 30th, 2020. Why is it not going live? Hold on, it's not going live on Rumble. Why would it do that? Well, it's recording, so personal problem with Rumble. Why in the world? Why in the world would it log me out in the middle of an episode? So let's stream again. And we are streaming on Wednesday, October 30th, 2024 at 12:22 p.m. Eastern Time with Mr. Troy Anderson to talk about your book, The Trump Code. And it that has been a conspiracy near and dear to my heart for probably since like 2016. I've just always loved, regardless of political affiliation, I've just always loved that idea that there was Nikola Tesla had all these, had all this esoteric advanced technology, and then he died, penniless in New York, and the FBI comes and some of it goes to MIT, and who's it go to? It goes to John Trump, and then I've always since the days of the Donald on Reddit and Pepe and I've always loved it, and it was really fun to read your book, but also, you know, I thought also it wasn't just a fun book. It was also it was deeply spiritual, deeply Christian, and saying that kind of all that aside, and this is at least what I took from it, is what we may perceive as, you know, quantum physics, DARPA, skunkworks stuff. That's how we perceive it, and it might be that's how it's being delivered to us. Much like a dog doesn't know where the bag of food comes from, it just thinks that you have it. That just might be kind of the ineffable mystery of Christ that to us it's so out of this world. We go, "Oh, it's got to be time travel. It's got to be," but to God, it's as simple as just like opening a door. It truly is. It starts to put into perspective. We always say it, God works in mysterious ways, or his power is unknowable. And I think this is actually kind of like, yeah, no, the power is unknowable. The only way we can possibly understand it is we go, is it a time machine? I mean, maybe it's so for everybody listening, please go in the description. Please go grab the book. It was an awesome read. I'm gonna shut up now and you please introduce yourself, sir.
Yeah, Thomas, it's great to be on your show, and I'm very glad to hear you enjoyed the Trump code and you know a lot about this topic. Yeah, it is very fascinating, and so I'm for your audience, I've been a journalist for 3 decades. I was a reporter at the LA Daily News for many years, nominated for a Pulitzer Prize. I've now written 7 books, 6 of which were #1 bestsellers, and the new book, The Trump Code, just came out.
And it is again it is fun. So to kind of get into it, then it's what you posit in the book, kind of what I believe, and it's not that God can or can't save the United States, and even that statement, it's not a nationalistic center of like it's like, well, no, it's just, strip the name of the United States flag, whatever, just call it what it is. It's the world's most powerful military, most powerful economy. And as far as world powers go and empires go, though we have our flaws, and we do, you never really get an empire whose thing is, for the most part, and I understand that's a huge asterisk, for the most part, does good in the world. I don't think there's any country out there that would rather China run the world. You can have your qualms with the US. At the end of the day, you'd much rather see an aircraft carrier with an American flag. It's just what it is. And so then, well, then why would God help this? Well, if we continue to do the right thing, if it is worth saving, then it will be saved. And I don't know if there's like an equation, if you have to hit like 51% of people. I don't know how the Lord works, but it does seem, and I think that's what you put forward in the book, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, is that if enough people turn to Christ and enough people act Christ-like, then God will God will act. It will, as simple as I brush away a fly, God could just go, all right, country saved. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I mean that's so it's a sort of the theme of the Trump Code, the theme of all my books. I did this interview with Billy Graham back in 2013 for a 7-part WorldNet Daily series, and the thing he said to me that really stuck with me is he said, when God sent the prophet Jonah to Nineveh to warn them of judgment, the king and the people repented, and he believed the same thing could happen again, this time again in America. It's the only example in the Bible of God sparing the nation he intended to judge. And, as we all remember from Sunday school, from the Bible, you know, God sends Jonah to Nineveh, this very wicked, vicious nation, to warn them that they're going to be judged. But Jonah, doesn't want to go there because he knows how brutal they are, and so he flees, gets on a boat, heads the opposite direction. A gigantic storm comes up. He has to fess up to the sailors. Yeah, I'm running from God. That's why there's big storms. They, throw me overboard. They throw him overboard. He gets swallowed by this, giant fish or giant whale. Spends 3 days in the belly of the whale. Probably got, resurrected by God, and then spit up on the shores of Nineveh. And all he says is 40 days, and Nineveh will be overthrown. And there's this, some evidence there could have been a great eclipse around that time. And so the king and the people will actually repent, and then God spares the nation. And so that's the story Billy Graham told me. So we included that in my first book, The Babylon Code, which is an expose of globalism, exploration of mystery Babylon in the book Revelation. And then this pastor, he was so inspired by the book, he gave a whole box of the Babylon codes to the Trump team in early 2016. And then Trump, 2 months later, announced that Americanism, not globalism, would be our credo as his platform for president. And then, as we all remember, he won, stunned the world. And our agent came to us and said, why don't you guys write a follow-up book and call it Trumpocalypse? So we wrote our second book, Trumpocalypse. At the time, I was editor of Charisma magazine, it's a Christian magazine, and I met Reverend Kevin Jessup, who's a descendant of the Pilgrims Fathers, Pastor John Robinson, who sent the Pilgrims to America on the Mayflower, and he told me he felt led to lead a national repentance movement. And so we featured an interview with him in Trumpocalypse. We called for a National Day of Repentance because the last one in America was one Abraham Lincoln had called for. And so he's an amazing networker. He persuaded Rabbi Kahn to be the spokesman. And this event actually happened. It was called the Return National and Global Day of Prayer and Repentance. It was on the National Mall. 250,000 people showed up. 42 million people watched this. President Trump flew over Marine One and issued a proclamation for a day of prayer and return. He's the first president to do this since Abraham Lincoln. And then everybody thought Trump was going to win the election, and then he didn't, right? And of course, a lot of questions about what happened there. And then this year, April 8th, we had this great North American eclipse, and it goes through all these towns called Nineveh in America. So I wrote a story for Charisma. Is this our Nineveh moment, our chance to turn back to God before this pivotal presidential election? Has God put the ball in our court? And so that to answer your question, that's the theme of the Trump Code, all my books. Is this our Nineveh moment? And at what point do enough people pray, fast, repent that God says, okay, this is enough. The cup of iniquity has been overflowing, but I'm going to relent from judging. And because God's used America in huge ways to spread the gospel around the world for centuries. We support Israel, the apple of God's eye. So I believe that we're at this pivotal moment in history. He's put the ball in our court. If we do the right thing, we could see a big turnaround here, see Trump get elected. But it's our decision. That's the message of the Trump Code.
And can you just kind of go into the whole for the people that maybe aren't aware of it? Because legitimate, I mean, I can't help but smile because it's just one of my favorite. Can you go into the whole conspiracy around just the time machine, the Nikola Tesla, because I just love it.
Yeah, so this is the fun part of the book. So, so after I wrote that story, Charisma came back and said, "Hey, Troy, why don't you write a book? Put this 5,000 piece jigsaw puzzle together about Trump." And so we called it the Trump Code. And so one of the key things we look at is what's called the Baron Trump collection. So there's a novelist and lawyer named Ingersoll Lockwood. He lived in the 1800s. He actually had a government appointment by Abraham Lincoln as consular general to Hanover, Germany. And this is sort of the time of the popular Alice in Wonderland books. And so he writes this Baron Trump collection. It's child fantasy novels. And the drawing on the cover of the book is this little boy, and he looks strikingly like Baron Trump, President Trump's son. And it's at the Library of Congress. And so there's been stories in Newsweek and Politico and Daily Mail, talking about this fascinating book. And so in the book, Baron Trump lives in Castle Trump on Fifth Avenue in New York City, where Trump Tower now stands, 130 years later. And he's guided by Don Fum, the master of all masters, and they go on time traveling adventures. And so they go to Russia, they go to see heads of state, they have all these great adventures. And what's really intrigued people is the last book is called The Last President. And in this book, this populist president is elected, and it says that mobs of anarchists and socialists converge on Castle Trump, shouting death to the rich man. and then chaos erupts, violence, civil war, military is called in. And so, people have asked, is this somehow prophetic in nature? Is this what's going to happen with this upcoming election? It's now just a few days away. And there's some, interestingly enough, there's a very intriguing time travel connection, and Nikola Tesla. We can go into that also.
Can you go into that?
So the other element here is, so Nikola Tesla, he's sort of considered the architect of our modern world. His genius inventor, and supposedly he invented the zero point energy, this idea you can pull energy from other dimensions. He presented this to Edison and some of the luminaries of the past, and it was rejected. And because there's trillions of dollars tied up in petroleum and oil and natural gas and coal and that kind of thing. So, and then, our modern electric grid is based off of Tesla's ideas, wireless communications, a lot of things we have today are genius ideas that Tesla's had. And so at the end of his life, he's going from hotel to hotel in New York City, sort of penniless. And he's got these 80 trunks of like documents of research, his lifetime work. And so he dies. And this is actually just a few years before Trump is born, interestingly enough. But when he dies, and they're both in New York City, when he dies, the FBI at the time, reporters would go interview him, and he'd say, "Well, I've invented the death ray." And the idea was that if the Nazis attacked us with nuclear weapons, supposedly this weapon could vaporize their air force. And so, there's a certain national security interest in what ideas he had. And so the FBI actually called in John Trump, who is President Trump's uncle. He's a highly respected professor at MIT, to look at all of Tesla's stuff. And so he comes back, and the official version is, I don't think there's really anything of national security interest here. But then mysteriously, all these files, all these Tesla files, one marked government and stuff like that, go missing. And so the History Channel just did a special on this, the missing files of Tesla. In the Trump Code, I interviewed the author of the books that inspired that series, Mark Cypher. And the idea is that the government probably used Tesla's ideas to invent all kinds of top secret weaponry and technologies, and perhaps even time travel stuff. And so we explore these very fascinating subjects in the Trump Code.
How much validity do you think there is to that? Sorry, I muted this. My dishwasher's beeping. How much validity do you think that there is to that? I'm gonna go turn that off. That's annoying me. All right, sorry. How much validity? How much validity do you think that there is to this? Because I mean, again, I love it, but I always have to, you know, I always have to sort of measure myself and be like, how much do I believe in this versus how much do I just want it to be true out of like sheer entertainment value?
Well, I mean, what we do know is that Congress is having these UFO UAP hearings. All these military people from the around the world for decades and decades are reporting all kinds of strange sightings and things like that. So they're having these hearings on Congress. So that the Sun newspaper, Britain's largest newspaper, filed a Freedom of Information Act request a few years ago with the federal government regarding all this. And the Defense Intelligence Agency came back not too long ago, released a bunch of documents, and in these documents, they said they believe time travel is possible. That may explain how these UFOs and UAPs are getting here through wormholes, quantum physics, that kind of thing. And then so that's intriguing. Does the government have some kind of technology like this? And it could have been developed from Tesla's ideas. After the book came out, a friend of mine who's a reliable source, he has connections to the CIA and NSA and that kind of thing. He called me and says, "Troy, you're not going to believe this." He goes, I'm told that the government has some kind of technology, sort of like this remote viewing stuff, where supposedly one person can go from one place to another place. I don't know, time, astral travel or something like that. But they can actually pick up an object and bring it back. So, and then another guy called me, and he said that he's a Christian. He has a ministry of people who have prophetic abilities or dreams. They have prophetic dreams. And he says they actually contracted the CIA, and the CIA will analyze all their dreams for prophetic information. So there's all kinds of strange things that the public's somewhat unaware of, that the government may have. Do they actually have this stuff, or is it just propaganda, disinformation? We don't know, but it's very intriguing to when you dig into all this.
Yeah, I mean, it would be effective propaganda, right? I mean, what better way to instill just absolute fear or demoralization in your enemy to be like, yeah, we can time travel. I mean, that really, no pun intended, that kind of trumps everything, all right? Well, we have a nuke. I'll, I'll, I'll look in the future and see where you nuke and I'll stop it. You can't really, you can't really fight against it. But I mean, because this is what I always come back. I mean, 2020, the election was absolutely stolen. I'm banned from YouTube, so it doesn't matter. It was absolutely stolen. COVID is a lab-made bioweapon, blah, blah, blah. But I always look back to 2016 and like he did get in, which tells I don't think he just, I think he's probably a bright guy. I think Trump's probably a bright billionaire, right? But I don't think he's like the smartest man to ever live. And I don't think he single-handedly defeated the Bush dynasty and the Clinton dynasty and just got into office. So that always tells me that he had some sort of backing or some sort of coalition or some sort of, government mafia, whatever word you want to use. You don't get into the highest office in the land without, and it's a sad truth. I mean, you should, but it's also, we live in reality where there's corruption. He didn't get in there without some backing in the intelligence community or the military or the existing kind of bureaucratic blob or, financial backing. In the same way that, I think Elon Musk is brilliant. I don't think he just purchased Twitter. It was we know through the Twitter files, we know through Facebook and Instagram, we know that the government, the DHS, the FBI, they all had a backdoor into these things to control it. They were in many ways state organs and portrayed as some free market social media thing, but we know that they were getting a lot of directives from the Biden-Harris administration. So again, I don't think Elon just bought Twitter because he had enough money. If that was the town square of the planet, and if the intelligence community, not if, we know they had a hand in that, they don't just give that up. You can't, it's not as simple as like, here's the money and you give me Twitter. And they're like, shucks, right? It's power. Power doesn't give itself up. Power's taken every time, right? So Elon Musk buying Twitter, someone somewhere or some group of people or a series of gatekeepers or whatever. And I'm not even saying they're the elite. They might just be horizontally powerful. That was signed off on somewhere. Again, you don't the ultimate high ground. Sorry, there's some fire trucks going by. The ultimate high ground, right, is so World War One kind of showed the feasibility of air power from Graf von Zeppelin to the biplane. World War Two showed its overwhelming tide turning capabilities just through the waves of bombers, Curtis LeMay. We had the U.S. Army Air Forces. It wasn't an Air Force, it was the Army Air Force. That was their wing. It'd be like if I had an Air Force, it'd be called Tommy's Air Forces. Truman separates the Air Force from the Army after World War II, I think in 1947 48, because it was such an overwhelming mover and shaker of the war, arguably decided the war. As that goes over the decades, they slowly have U.S. Space Command, and then finally under Trump, and I'm not even sure if it's related so much as it was just a matter of time. History shows that you'd break it apart again. So why am I saying all of this? Space is the ultimate high ground. It just tactically is. It is you are truly above everything. You are above anti-air missiles. You are just loitering capabilities, nonstop surveillance. You don't need spy planes. You can just go up in orbit and just look down at them. So Elon Musk, the Trump supporting guy who buys Twitter, also just has like the biggest contract for rockets, delivery systems for the NRO, the National Reconnaissance Office, and the CIA and the National Geospatial Agency, as well as his own kind of sphere of to the average person, you go, yeah, he put up a bunch of satellites. No, that is the ultimate high ground. He has a bunch of kinetic vehicles up there. You can't just buy a penthouse near the White House with a line of sight because you realistically you could have a gun. So my point of all this kind of yammering is these aren't insignificant things. There aren't insignificant things that Trump won in 2016. And it's not insignificant that Elon Musk bought Twitter. It's not insignificant that Elon Musk also has Starlink. And it's certainly not insignificant that Musk is backing Trump. So I don't really know where I'm going with this so much as it's to me that is the reason for optimism and that is the reason for hope. And the ultimate reason I think we both agree is find God. But to also just look at it like a geopolitical chessboard. If none of this would happen, if there wasn't some formidable and competent resistance, white hats, whatever you want to call it. So I don't know your thoughts on any of that. There's not really a question in there. I kind of just word vomited at you, but that's also what this podcast is. It's just me screaming and the guest nodding politely.
Oh, no, no, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, the things that go on behind the scenes with the intelligence agencies, the elite, the real power brokers, is very highly sophisticated, chessboard maneuvers, exactly. And you're correct. Trump didn't get it in there without some kind of support from, the conservative side, perhaps the white hats. There's a lot of good people in government. I was a newspaper reporter for 20 years. And then most people you meet that work in government are trying to do a good job, trying to serve the public. There's a certain amount that are corrupt and lazy and that kind of thing, but it's to that extent in many different organizations and businesses. And just realities of politics is you're not going to achieve that high level of presidency without a lot of agreements with very wealthy people and that kind of thing. And so yeah. Is it possible that the elite have now decided that Trump could be a good thing for the country come November 5th, a week from now, we're about to find out. But yeah, there's always a lot more going on behind the scenes than what we understand. And there's also, tons of, propaganda and disinformation, as you pointed out, this idea of, defense intelligence agency come out saying we believe time travel is possible is sort of like a then make the Russians afraid, right? Make the Chinese afraid. We could do whatever we want. We're sort of larger than life and have these secret powers, right? Uh, so is it really real or is it just disinformation?
It's like that Simpsons meme where it's just Bart going, "What an odd thing to say." Who said that? Was it the crazy guy in the street corner? No, the DIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, set up under Kennedy to parallel and push back against the CIA. And what did they say? They said that time travel might be possible. Huh. What a what it is kind of one of the things where you're like, anyway, I gotta go get groceries. Like there's nowhere to go from there. It's not like, it's not like you're like, hey, my book just got a movie deal. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. We talk it is like so high above like our own existence. You're like, what an interesting thing to say. The national security apparatus is saying they might be able to manipulate this fabric of space time. Anyway, like there's kind of nowhere to go from that. But what you can do is you can look at, I guess, the ripples. How does it manifest in our own world, right? It's, uh, you know, I think it's as much as I don't like this current administration, I do think there's something to be said. Let's just remove emotion from it. There is something to be said for is there like a functioning Star Wars system like Reagan's SDI? Is there a functioning, I mean, you talk about it in the book, Trump talks about it, an Iron Dome-esque thing? Because and I don't support the war in Ukraine. I'm really just trying to move away from ever like cheering on a war. I'm just at a certain point where I'm like, it is murder. It is what it is. Not to be a total hippie, but you do look at the way we're acting towards Russia. It's not right, but again, just look at it objectively. We're acting in a manner, it's like going into a gang headquarters in like an EOD suit where it's just a full armor. And if somebody was just kind of going in there and running their mouth, you go, I bet that's bulletproof because that guy's really running his mouth. We are acting in a manner in Ukraine that is it begs it begs the imagination of do we have something to intercept nuclear weapons like reliably? To which even itself is not really kind of the topic of what we're talking about, but rather it it would lend credence to time travel, DIA, Nikola Tesla, John, all these things. This is what it would look like. It would look like, well, how would you and I know? It'd be in a special access program. We wouldn't know. How would it look like in our daily life? Well, I don't think I would probably see any proof of time travel in my, I'm a 34-year-old podcaster. But on the geopolitical scale, on the world scale, what would it look like? It's one thing to bully Afghanistan and Iraq for 20 years. We're really poking the bear with Russia, and you go, is it just psychopathy? Is it just suicidal tendencies? Is it arrogance? Is it ego? Do they still think we're 1990s America? It could be all those things. Another part of me says, do we have some sort of SDI, strategic defense or space defense, whatever it is, strategic defense initiative? And what is the importance of that? Well, that implies that there is some hyper advanced technology somewhere, and that kind of leads back up. It's like finding a thread and going back up. That would kind of go back to like, is there some truly reality manipulating technology that exists somewhere? And if it exists somewhere, there's a non-0% chance that everything you're talking about is factual. So I know that was kind of a roundabout way, but that's what it would look like. You would see little things and be like, that's an odd behavior. Why is that happening? Well, it implies either off-world or alien or reverse engineered or whatever technology. So again, I don't really know if there's a question in there. Kind of throwing that at you.
Yeah, so I mean, you make a very important point there is that this is sort of odd behavior for the U.S. to really push Russia, who's, constantly threatening us with nuclear war, threatening Europe with nuclear attack. You got, North Korea's threats of nuclear attack, and in China, at some point may take advantage of this, chaotic situation to attack Taiwan, which could bring America into the whole thing. So is the world really at the verge of World War III and this powder keg, perhaps? But if you're right, if we actually had some of these super advanced technologies where if we could somehow peer into the future and,
Mm.
could we develop, super highly advanced, weapon systems that could take out a nuclear attack? I don't know if the government has this or not, but it's a very interesting question to raise. But yeah, by looking at the behavior of the federal government, it's an intriguing question. I never thought of that. That's very interesting.
Um, uh, Real quick, I get told you to drink a lot more. I gotta use the restroom. Can you tell everyone where to find the book, your website, social medias, all that stuff, and I'll be back in 30
Yeah,
seconds.
yeah, sure. Yeah, so the Trump Code is available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. Just came out on September 17th. It's a number one bestseller. The Audible version just came out on October 8th. It's a number one hot new release. And or you can go to my website. It's troyanderson.us. And all kinds of all my books are on there. And we've got some great newsletters, revelationwatchers.com and prophecyinvestigators.com, free newsletters you can help out if you want, all kinds of great articles and videos and interviews. One of my co-authors, Pastor Paul Begley, he's got a big show. We feature on Revelation Watchers. He's got a YouTube channel for 250,000 views and all kinds of great guests on his show. So go to troyanderson.us and you can find out more about our books. We've got the Babylon Code and Trumpocalypse with Paul McGuire. He used to be the former host of a national syndicated radio show, and a whole bunch of great books on there.
Thank you. Sometimes I say that to guests. I'm like, I gotta go to the bathroom. Can you vamp for a minute? And they go, okay. And then they literally just stare at the camera silently. I'm like, what? Did stage fright? Like, what was that? Um, One of the things about I think it was when Commander Fravor went on Joe Rogan to talk about the 2004 Nimitz thing with the Tic Tac and the UFO, and obviously there was a lot of significant implications about that. Be it alien or be it our own, it seems to be real. And aside from like the basics, it went from 80,000 feet to sea level in half a second. It went from above an aircraft carrier to over the horizon in like three-quarters of a second. Someone did the math. It's like Mach 800 or something. It's not even the space shuttle went Mach 23. The way it was maneuvering, it would kill anyone inside. So even if it was a drone, so the electronics would have to survive that. So it implied some sort of disruptive field around it. And again, was it alien or was it our own? And we were doing some, red cell operation against our own forces. Because what better way if something is battle ready than to throw it against the most powerful navy, our own? and not tell them it's a drill. But what better way to do it? And I could be wrong on this. I might be remembering it incorrectly, but I believe Commander Fravor said um, that some. I want to make sure I word it correctly. So it's happening wherever in Grid Square over here, and it happens, and everyone's kind of discombobulated. And they're like, "What's going on?" And they had a I guess a rally point or a cap point or something, and it's like somewhere you fall back to if things get hairy or whatever. I guess it's standard protocol for fighter jets. And we'll call that, let's just say it's like a battleship grid square. Let's say they're in A1 and they went, all right, they get the command from the aircraft carrier or whatever, or Fravor gives it, I forget who. Let's just say it's in C3. So it's, however many miles that way. And they go, when they got there, the Tic Tac was waiting for them there, which I don't. Okay, well, if we're talking about this thing's going like half the speed of light, like sure, it would probably it intercept you, and you'd say, "Hey, we're going to C3," and I go, "Okay, I'm just going to go to C3 and meet him there." The weird thing, though, and I could be incorrect, but to me, this was the most profound part of the interview, so I don't think I'm remembering it incorrectly. Is had the Tic Tac had evaded the radar of the fighter jets, but the radar on the actual ships themselves were much more powerful. I think it's called the Spy One radar, and it was tracking the Tic Tac the entire time. And as the chronology of this entire event unfolded, it wasn't just that the Tic Tac went to cap point C3 before the fighter jets got there, which again, that's not impressive. You go, well, it's faster, so of course. Apparently, if they like played back the recording of whatever the three-dimensional radar recording was, it went to cap point C3 before anyone on the fighter jet said, let's go to C3. And it also wasn't just that they had pre-designated C3 as the meeting point, because again, then that's just signals interception. There's nothing special about that. It's you intercept, you go, hey, if anything goes wrong, they're going here. Apparently it was they came up with it on the probably for it probably is some sort of safety redundancy, like don't have it planned beforehand because somebody could intercept it. So before they said we're going to go to cap point C3, the ship detected the Tic Tac at it. That's that's time travel. It knew. To me, that is the most wild part about it. Everything else is impressive. Sure, it has no pilot, it has no wing, whatever. That's all. That's what you expect from a UFO. That implies, I mean, that's true demoralization. It's one thing if something's going Mach 80 up and down, you're like, I don't know how we're going to catch that. Well, maybe we'll just nuke it. What if something's like peering 3 seconds into the future? There's nothing you can do. So I don't know if that was in 2004. So that was 20 years ago. I don't know if that, again, is that something else that we would see if all this stuff was true. And again, I obviously you don't have the answer. If you did, they'd kill you. But what do you think about that?
My first co-author, Paul McGuire, mentioned him. We wrote the Babylon Code and Trumpocalypse together. He's actually researched this. He wrote the forward to the Trump Code, and he's been researching all these kind of things for like 4 decades. And so he believes that the technologies the government has is probably 50 to 100 years ahead of what we sort of think they really have. And so, I read a lot of books about the UFOs and UAPs, and I've watched all these TV specials. I've always been fascinated by this stuff since I was a kid. And Hugh Ross, I don't know if you know him or not. He's a doctor of physics. He's has a ministry called Reasons to Believe here in Southern California, and he's got a lot of friends at JPL and NASA. And I did an interview with him for a couple of different books, and he wrote a book about the UFO phenomena, and he said that essentially you have these craft doing all these like crazy kind of maneuvers like you described there, and sometimes there'll be reports that they've crashed. And so he said you can go to these crash sites and people have gone to them and you'll see crushed vegetation. It looks like a craft, crash, but there's no craft there. There's no UFO, there's no UAP. And And so, he's talked to like these guys aren't Christians. They're just, people work at NASA and JPL. And he says they believe this whole thing's interdimensional in nature, that these things are coming from other dimensions. And, the Bible talks about there being multiple dimensions, the, realm of the angels and the demons and the great spiritual battle going on in the background. And so, could this be an interdimensional phenomena? He said that, the nearest planet that might harbor life is so many light years away that it's, unless they could, develop wormholes and quantum physics and these kind of things, it's pretty much impossible for any kind of alien craft to get here, especially any extraterrestrial life that could actually get here. And so, could this, what the Bible describes as this, these other dimensions, physicists now tell us there's at least 10 dimensions. Could there be technologies in this other dimension, this spiritual dimension? Is that what we're seeing? And, could this ultimately be what the apostle, I think John referred to as the great deception that helps, bring the Antichrist to power and the events of the tribulation, polls show that, something like 60-70% of Americans believe, UFOs and ETs are visiting us and are, because they've watched all these TV shows, they've read all these books and the movies and everything. And meanwhile, there's like, Barna comes out, these polls says only about 6% of Americans actually still have a biblical worldview, actually believe the Bible. And so there's far more people that believe in ET now than believe in God as he's described in the Bible. So, could this be some kind of gigantic, great deception that helps bring the Antichrist to power? So that's one of the things that sort of guys in the Bible prophecy community talk about, and there's books coming out on this now. So it's a very intriguing subject because I've read a lot of these books on this whole phenomenon.
Yeah, again, that's probably what it would look like. It wouldn't be, the deception or the demons. They're not, at least I don't think. It's not gonna be some, caped, red-faced demon walking around from like Halloween City. It's it's going to be some sort of like dazzling magic, and it's not going to be magic like Gandalf or Harry Potter. It's going to appear to be magic, and that will be, yeah, craft coming out of a wormhole. And yeah, this is 100 light years away. Well, first of all, they also thought that if a human ever went faster than the speed of light, that they'd turn to jelly. So I don't really put, not saying that you're saying this, I don't really put a lot of weight in the whole, well, we can't go faster than the speed of light. Yeah, for now. In the same way, we were convinced that the world was flat and that, there'd never be heavier than air flight and all that stuff. And even Bill Gates back in the 80s, you'll never need more than 640 kilobytes of memory. I mean, this podcast is already multiple gigabytes. Like, it's millions and billions of times larger. So, yeah, so either they are going faster than the speed of light, or they're not, but they found a way to go interdimensional, which effectively is faster than the speed of light. So it wouldn't be like, I don't know why I'm just getting the image. Do you remember the animated Prince of Egypt? And you have like the wizards and stuff. I don't know. I had to watch it in middle school. It's not going to be that. It's not going to be like a fat guy in a robe. It's going to be some dazzling display of, I mean, in our society, in our nonfiction society, who are the high priests, who are and it's the advanced military stuff. That is our, like, our modern day, for better or worse, that is like our priest class, right? It's a stealth bomber dropping a laser guided bomb from 50,000 feet. That is magic. If you're just sitting there and cobble and all of a sudden the building next to you explodes, that's magic. So this is what magic would look like. The question then is begged, is this the deception? Is this the magic coming in as, again, right? They don't say like, you know, the depths of Satan's evil are incomprehensible, but they also say it's impossible to understand his beauty. It is very vain. It is like Hollywood dialed up to 11. It's supposed to be, right? The light bringer. You're supposed to kind of go, that must be God. But I always just get this feeling, and I've had on Charlie Duke, Apollo 16 astronaut, one of three men alive who've walked on the surface of the moon. And he said with that question, he goes, UFOs are demons. That's exactly what they are. They're demons. And I always think like, what is it, the anglerfish that has the little light that hangs out in front of it? And then in Finding Nemo, they see the little light. And I know it's a children's film and it's not a documentary, but it's like they see the light and they're like, oh, look at that. It's so beautiful because they're in like the depths of the ocean and it's cold and dark. And they just see this warm light and it's almost like a fireplace on Christmas. And they're just like, oh, this is great. Look at this little light. And as they get closer, they see the fangs of hell from the anglerfish. I have a creeping feeling that the shiny, beautiful thing, the UFO, and it's got the, and who knows, maybe I have like Stockholm syndrome and I just think, life on Earth should be hell. That's also a possibility. But when you see it's 0 point energy, and if we figure this out, we'll figure out everything, and it's all going to be good. Part of me is like, is that the, is that the little, don't worry about it. Everything's going to be fine. Unlimited pleasure. You'll live forever. I'm like, are we going to see the fangs? Like, what is that? It's, it's, you don't need any advanced technology to get right with God. You don't need to have a physics degree. You don't need to be read into some DARPA skiff. You can just ask God to come into your heart. Ask yourself to be a better man or woman. Don't covet your neighbor's wife. Don't commit adultery. Don't steal. Don't act in rage. You don't need some $100 trillion Cold War program. So I don't know. But I also just have to be, intellectually honest and say it could be that, you know, what's that? What was that? There's like a Japanese soldier or something, I think, who was like his the final command he received was to like hold the island at all costs in like 1944, and he was still killing people in like 1977. He thought the war was still going on. They dropped pamphlets and they said like, "Hey, the war ended 3 decades ago. Like your family misses you." And he was like, "This is the U.S. They're doing a psyop." So the U.S. like got Japan to say like, "Hey, the empire's over. We're like the sovereign republic of Japan now. Like, please come out. You're killing people." And I don't think I think he eventually did come out. And then, but my point is like, I'm also not entirely sure that I'm not just like, you know, some like battered wife. Where I'm like, no, life on Earth is supposed to be suffering and hell. And it's like, this also just might be like a good thing. I don't know. What do you think? Is it pure demonic? Is it a good thing, or most likely the least sexy answer? Is it somewhere in between?
Yeah, so in Trumpocalypse, I interviewed this lady who claimed to be part of the Illuminati secret society. If they really exist or not. One of my ancestors is Frederick von Schiller. He's the poet that wrote Ode to Joy that Beethoven set to music in the Ninth Symphony. Wrote some famous plays, and at the time in the late 1700s, he was actually friends with many members of the original Bavarian Illuminati, the actual secret society that existed back then. And
Oh,
eventually the Bavarian government became aware of it and disbanded it, banned it. And then, the theory is that did they go underground? Did they merge with Freemasonry and far more powerful and wealthy today? So it doesn't really exist. So this lady claimed that she was in this, occult group. And she said that what they're planning, and I quoted her in Trumpocalypse, is what they're planning is this great deception is going to be something that may involve UFOs. It may involve the biggest, essentially psyop in history, where they'll fake the second coming of Christ. And so this, whenever this entity shows up, people will think this is the return of Christ, and that'll be the great deception, and it'll involve all these super high technologies and could involve, these demonic entities with technology or something like that. So it was very intriguing to sort of hear her supposed inside insights on how this great deception is going to play out and how it will fool most of the world. And so that's so that there's probably a very highly sophisticated scheme that the devil and the elite are planning to, deceive people into accepting the mark of the beast system and the Antichrist as our savior and that kind of thing. So it's probably far different than what we've, seen on TV and movies and Left Behind series and that kind of thing.
and again, not that you have the answer to this. These are kind of like the questions of life. But you say in the book, did God just kind of haphazardly plant us here, plant you and I and whoever in 2024? Like, were we really abandoned as the world is engulfed in, thermonuclear hellfire or pandemics or, just dissolution of borders and anarchy and, truly the inversion of all that is holy and all that we know. What is a man? What is a woman? What is the age of consent? Were we abandoned here? Would an all-loving God abandon us here? Is it, and is it that we're here in this time for a purpose? Yeah, if you put in a the closing pitch, you put in Mariano Rivera for the Yankees, bottom of the ninth. I mean, do you think he goes out there and goes, "Oh, why did you put me in now? It's the bottom of the ninth. It's the World Series." It's like, yeah, no, that's why we're paying you $100 million because you're the best closer. You come out here and you just throw bullets. That's one way to look at it. That's how I like to look at it. Not because of some ego, like I'm the best, but rather I'm not abandoned. There is a method to the madness. Another part of me says that there doesn't need to be a method to the madness. It might be that I'm 34. I hope to live for another 50 years. I hope to, get married and have a wife and kids and go through the whole, you know, gamut of human experience. But in comparison to the halls of eternity, and not even eternity, and I'm 34. It's been, America's almost 250 years old. It's been like a little over 500 years since Columbus came here. A little over 2,000 since Jesus walked, a little over, 5,000 since the pyramids, a little over 10,000 since the first since the agricultural revolution, a little over 500,000 since standing upright and being nomads and hunter-gatherers instead of monkeys on all fours, to 100 million since dinosaurs, to 500 million since whatever the Precambrian, when everything came out of the oceans and started walking around, to 100 or a billion to whatever the first aerobic organisms, to like 2 billion the first dividing and reproducing prokaryotic kind of archaic life. 4 billion for the age of the earth, and like whatever, 6 billion for the sun, and 13 billion for the universe, and even 13 billion, what seems to us to be the upper limit of our understanding of existence itself in relation to the halls of eternity. 13 billion would be as quick as my 34 years. So my point in saying all that is it might be that to God, an all-knowing, all-loving, all-seeing God, this isn't abandoning at all. It's like, yeah, you're there, and yeah, I'm not gonna lie, it kind of sucks. You're at the end. It would probably be better to be alive in like the 1950s. But in relation to eternity, this is really, a fraction of the blink of an eye. So, suck it up. If you do the right thing, you'll be in the kingdom of heaven. So it could just be that there is no rhyme or reason to this because the other side is just eternity with God. Or it could be that it's more of like the Yankees pitcher thing, like he's putting in the A team. I don't know. I guess it's got to be. I suppose I didn't. I just now thinking about it. I suppose it's one or the other, and both kind of seem to imply God. So I don't know. Maybe I just talked myself into a positive outlook. I don't know. It's just kind of like walk.
Well,
It's like a dog catching its tail. I just kind of like, huh. All right, maybe it's all good.
well, I've always believed. I've actually, even though I write these books about the end times and Bible prophecy and all this stuff, I'm sort of an optimist at heart. And so here, I was talking to a writer. I was on a bike ride like 4 weeks ago. We're just talking because he's a writer for the guy that did the Return, that National Day of Repentance thing. And so we're talking, and all of a sudden this thought popped in my head. Why don't we do 40 days to Save America campaign and just encourage people to pray, fast, and repent from September 26th to November 5th? And so he goes, "Oh yeah, that's a great idea, Troy." So we started sending this out in our newsletters. My first co-author, Paul McGuire, joined us. Pastor Paul Begley, has got a big YouTube show, 250 million views. He joined us. Dr. Bruce Oliver, who's got a top 100 Christian podcast, he joined us. He's spreading the word. Derek Gilbert at Skywatch TV. Prisma Media did some stories because I used to be editor there, and so it's sort of catching on. Now I'm seeing pastors and ministers and faith leaders across the country. So like we got to pray, we got to fast, we got to repent. And so yesterday, my wife had an idea. Why don't we do a open letter to President Trump and encourage him to call the nation to prayer and fasting before this election? So I go, okay, yeah, let's just go ahead and do it. So we did a video a couple days ago, and we just sent it out yesterday, and essentially calling on President Trump, just like the king in Nineveh, just like Billy Graham foresaw. This could be our Nineveh moment. If the president, if the king, the leader calls the nation to repentance, that's exactly what happened in ancient Nineveh, and God intervened and didn't judge them. And so, there's hope. I mean, who knows? A friend of ours gave this video to Ben Carson, who's good friends with President Trump. He may give it to the president. Our literary agent, he's actually good friends with one of the architects of the Trump campaign, and he's looking at it right now. They gave it to the president, so we'll see what happens here. Maybe he will. And so, is this the Nineveh moment that Billy Graham foresaw? I think it might be. And so, I think there is hope, and God may just very well intervene here. And then, that's why I wrote all these books, is so that I have kids your age, and and younger, and so I want to give the younger generation hope for the future, because everybody needs hope. And so I think there could be a big turnaround here. I think President Trump's probably going to be elected, and we're going to see a big turnaround. Of course, there's going to be a gigantic fight that's going to erupt. They're not just going to give up, but perhaps we'll get another reprieve and another 4 years, 8 years, who knows, to help keep spreading the gospel and doing the good things that God has called us to do.
Uh, we're coming up on an hour, so we'll wrap it up. I was gonna say there's a meme I like, and it's a new word. He goes, "I'm an apocalyptimist," which means I do kind of think everything is coming to an end, but I'm also very optimistic that it's gonna be just okay. And it's apocalyptimist. It's
Yeah,
it,
that's
it
great.
it's the end times, but it's the end times of something. It's the end of something. Doesn't imply you go to bed, you go, the day's ending, the sun's setting. You don't go, "Wow, it's all over." It's the end of yesterday was the end of the 29th. Well, what happens? Well, the next day is the 30th. It continues, you idiot. Like it might just be like, yeah, it's the end times of this. It's the end of that. And then the new thing begins. So I don't know, but I do know that, I always like the much shorter quotes, be still and know I am God, and uh I am that I am. But I also just like be not afraid. It's so simple, but it really is. Like, it doesn't mean it won't be challenging, that there won't be stresses and sacrifice and pain. But like, don't, like a scary movie is scary. Roller coasters are terrifying. But don't be afraid. Like it does. It's a thing designed to be scary for a reason. But don't be afraid. Be excited. It can make you jump. It can make you nervous. But don't, at your core, don't be afraid. And that's very easy. It's much easier said than done. But I don't know. I like to kind of fall back on that one. Like, that wouldn't be, God wouldn't have said that if that wasn't like a legit thing to take to heart. Like, don't be afraid. So, um, but dude, that was fun. Thank you so much for coming on. It's like I said, it's one of my probably like top three favorite. Yeah, as a conspiracy glutton, it really is one of my favorites. I absolutely love that. I've been looking forward to this episode. For everybody listening, you can go to the link in the description. You can grab the book. And anything else? Closing thoughts?
Well, yeah, Thomas, I just say, look at all these characters in the Bible, just sort of regular people, who somehow summoned up enough bravery and courage to pull off all these amazing feats, and God helped them perform all these gigantic miracles. Many of them paid with their lives, but they did what was right. They obeyed God, and so in some sense, I mean, this is probably one of the most exciting times in history to be a Christian. We're watching all this stuff happen. God's put us all here, and he has a mission for all of us. I wrote a book called Your Mission in God's Army with Colonel David Giammona. This came out last March, and it's sort of like a modern day purpose-driven life to help inspire people to, join God's army, help bring in this great harvest, help fulfill the Great Commission, help the poor, help the needy, do everything that Jesus told us to do. And it's actually a very exciting, joyful life. So even as all chaos is erupting around us, we can, take to heart the joy of the Lord and the exciting adventure He has for our life. So that's how I encourage people.
Beautifully said, dude. Thank you so much. I'd love to have you back on again sometime, man. That was fun. And yeah, everybody, don't be pray. Don't be af if it's worth saving, it'll be saved. And I really do believe that. So, get right with God and don't be afraid. So, Mr. Anderson, thank you so much for your time, sir.
Yeah,
Guys,
yeah. Thank you.
yes,
God
sir.
bless you.
Thank you as well. God bless everybody. Please go grab the buckets in the description. Take care.